Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and in what feels like forever, I am with my co-host, Christy.
Hi, Lake.
It's good to see your face again after oh so long.
It's good to see your face. Sorry I've been so absent from this podcast. I mean, I had a good reason, but I missed you.
And part of that reason is why we're here today.
That's right.
Yeah. So actually, Christy, why don't you very quickly just recap the kind of segments of your trip here, and then we will jump into the main focus of just today's episode, because this trip will be at least 2 episodes for sure.
So we call it our epic European vacation, summer vacation. We started our trip with a trip to Paris so that my son could see the highlights. We went for a night at Disneyland Paris and spent like a day and a half-ish in the parks. Then we flew to Rome and did Adventures by Disney, 7-night Italy adventure, which went to Rome, Florence, and Tuscany/Florence and Venice. Then we had a couple of days where in Venice, then we went back to Rome. We met up with our friends who are going to join us on this podcast. And then we boarded the 9-night Greek Isles, Dubrovnik, and Malta cruise.
And to join us for this discussion, we have a whole crew of guests today. But first, let's welcome back Christy's husband, Dave. Dave, how are you today?
Hello, hello. Doing good. Very exhausted and but still wishing I was back on the trip. So
somehow you think 9 nights will be forever. And even though in the moment it might be, you're still like, oh man, that went way quicker than I thought.
Yep, absolutely.
I was talking to some random little girl on the cruise. I don't even know why this little girl and I were talking. She was like maybe 9. And she and I were discussing how quick the cruise went. And she even said, I've been on 4-night cruises that didn't feel this short. And yet somehow, and this was like on day 8 or something, 7 or 8 of the cruise. And it just went fast.
Adventures like this are crazy and go, go, go. There's a lot happening and a lot happens that you don't expect. I think every time we do a European type sailing or some sort of adventure sailing, before we jump into that and changes and all of the fun travel things that happen, we have some additional special guests with us.
You have heard me describe them as the Goodfellows before. They went on our Adventures by Disney river cruise that we did back, well, I don't even know what year we did that, maybe 24, 23? Yeah, 2023. And we met them on the first night of the cruise, became fast friends, have seen them various times now throughout the years since then. So welcome the Goodfellows, Dan and Roger, to the podcast.
Hi. Hello. It's great to be on here. We've listened to the podcast so many times, and obviously we've had a chance to see you a lot, Christy. We've never met Lake in person, or at least virtually by video. So this is great. And always good to see Dave again after spending so much time together recently.
Yeah, Dan one day was like taking notes in his phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I want to be on the podcast. I want to talk about this. And so I am taking notes so that I can remember the things. I'm like, well, at least one of us are. Good job.
That's right. We both, I think together, we were able to put some pretty good notes together.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I love a note taker. I am also like a cruise note taker.
Well, I'm always impressed by your guests who come on and then just have such great detail and recollection of their trip. And so we were like, we're going to have to prepare better if we want to be on a podcast. So,
and I think for the beginning of part of my trip, like the first 20 or 18 days, we had maybe less than that, whatever. We had a lot of notes and then we were tired.
We had definitely some lazy days in the beginning.
We had lazy days by design, and then we had lazy days by
necessity.
Sometimes you got to listen to your body and know when it's time to take a break. But let's go ahead and jump into it. First off, let's talk about why we all booked this sailing, and let's go ahead and start with Dan and Roger.
That is a good point. So if we go back to August of last year, we were in Florida. We were seeing Christy and Dave while we were there, and I was off meeting up with some friends. Christy went out to dinner with Roger and, I don't know, perhaps convinced him that a Malta trip was a great idea. And so when I returned, I learned that we were going on this cruise.
And I wanted to add that we actually had never, ever been on a Disney cruise before. So this was a really big step. So to test our ability to be on a Disney cruise, we actually did a 3-night Bahamian cruise in December as a test run. And it was fabulous. And so we continued on with our plan. So we're very excited to do this trip. It was definitely one of those bucket list trips for us.
And that was on the Wish. It was 3 days, and it was just enough of a taste to say, okay, we're really going to enjoy this cruise in June.
I'm only going to ask one question on that 3-night sailing before we jump down a rabbit hole. Did you feel like you learned things and got value out of doing the test pilot cruise?
Yes, I think so. I'll speak for myself, but Roger can as well. I had listened to, it wasn't long before that, we listened to the episode where your whole team ranked which boats, which ships everyone liked in which order. So we were very curious about all the things that you considered in those categories. And so we spent some time on the ship trying to understand, okay, where's the main section, guest services, what's the entertainment, all of those different things. So it gave us kind of an orientation of what to expect.
And in terms of what we learned, I think the big surprise for us was that we really had enjoyed the privilege of being on the Wish shortly after it had been rehabbed and zhuzhed. And so when we were on the Dream, we actually kind of found we actually enjoyed the Dream being a little bit smaller. So that was really quite nice comparison for us.
Love it. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. And then, Christy, Dave, you had some special reasons for wanting to book this sailing.
So I am 50% Maltese. My mom's family is from there. Half of her brothers were actually born there. And then they emigrated before the second half of the uncles and my mom were born. And I had never been to Malta. And this cruise we thought was doing 2 nights or 2 days in Malta. And in reality, it was like a late night departure out of Malta, which was still really cool. But we picked this cruise because of the long Malta day that it was going to have. And it allowed me an opportunity to go to see, as Dave would say, where my people are from.
I love it. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it then. How did everyone get to Italy, and how did you all get to the port?
Well, I'm going to quickly just start with, we get to Italy like 2 weeks before, 15 days before, and we'll talk about that maybe ever so briefly, because it was our listener Liz is like, do you ever have a Europe trip that just goes the way, like all of your bags, all of your people, everything arrives without stress? And no, I think the answer is no, we don't. As a family, we do not have an easy Europe trip, but that's a funny story. Funny, maybe now. No, I was laughing then, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. But then we took a train from Venice to Rome, where we stayed near the train station, near Termini. And Dan and Roger will talk about how they got there. They stayed near the train station in the same adequate hotel.
Yeah, I will just add that our methodology was a bit more expensive than most people that go to Italy for a cruise, and a bit longer, but I highly recommend it. It was a very fabulous 2 weeks leading up to the cruise. So
yeah, and we took an opportunity to fly to London, Thursday night prior to boarding the cruise into Friday morning. I worked from London on Friday, and then Saturday we met up with an old friend who we hadn't seen in about 6 years, who lives just outside of London, and we went to Windsor Castle and did a few things during the day, just had a really nice relaxing time and kind of got ourselves adjusted to European time. And then Sunday morning we flew to Rome, and that's when we met up with Christy and Dave in kind of the late afternoon and stayed. I guess we checked into the Best Western Hotel Universo. So, and it was actually quite nice. So
the location was amazing. So thank you, Christy, because we were literally only a few blocks away from the Colosseum. So it was an amazing location, and they were quite lovely at the hotel. So we were very glad that we had taken a couple of days ahead to adjust to the time so that we could fully appreciate our first time in Italy. So it was really cool.
Yeah, and Christy even took you guys out on a little walkabout the morning we were going to go to the cruise port to go see the Coliseum. So that was that location definitely, I think, was primo.
Yeah, and your room was way nicer than our room. So we had a very adequate experience at the Best Western Universal or whatever the heck that hotel was called that I picked. So no one's to blame but myself. But you had like this terrace and 2 floors and a huge bathroom. We had different room experiences. The room was fine though. It was adequate and, you know, a good location. So, and really we could walk from Termini, the train station. So honestly, with all of our luggage, and by then, you know, we had 4 bags, 2 medium and 2 little. It really wasn't a problem.
Yeah, well, let's to clarify, we had 4 luggages, but we also had 3 backpacks, and we had a carry-on that had our glass from Venice. So we had more than just the 3 luggages, but
I think we had a food bag.
And we had a food bag. So yeah, we accumulated all the bags.
So then you took the train from Rome to...
No, we were not about to do that with the bags, but we took a car service and we had a driver change and...
The little sketch.
It was a little sketch. And so we got there though. We made it.
I think we got the oldest driver in Italy, maybe.
And in the oldest car.
In the oldest car.
That he could not figure out the air conditioning. And of course it was like 90 degrees. It literally was cooler when we got out of the car than it was in the car when we got, but that was adequate as well. All of our luggage fit.
We made it there.
We didn't die, even though we got honked at many times because our driver drove in the middle of the road on the highway.
Yeah, and you guys were sort of self-medicating a little bit with some mango mimosas, some self-made mango mimosas. So it was, I think you guys enjoyed the trip a little bit better that way.
Yeah, Dad and I did bring a roadie for that car ride, and that was a good decision.
Well, you all finally arrived to the port together. You
and
get to
are
see
alive.
The beautiful Disney Dream. What was your embarkation process like?
I'm just going to briefly say that port is chaos. And you queue through multiple lines. And I had probably had PTSD from the last time when I did that cruise with Steve back in maybe, I don't know what year it was, 2022 maybe. And it is slightly better than that experience because the Wi-Fi works better. But that is it. You queue so many times and it is so crowded. Fortunately, I will say that the Pearl line, for as many times as you could use it, was awesome. And we were able to take Dan and Roger with us. And so we did that.
Thank you.
But just pack your patience because it's a lot.
And it's really, really hot.
It's really
so that
hot.
just adds into the challenge of queuing up with people with bags and everything. So
and it's just chaos. Like they have you in these lines outside that don't really make sense, but you take your luggage in with you into the building. And then it's just, it's not the most magical, but it's fine. Then you walk out and you see the ship, and that's better.
Well, you get to board the Dream, and I'm going to turn it to Dan and Roger here because it is your first time aboard her. What was it like entering the atrium of the Dream?
Yeah, I think it's so for reasons that maybe we won't go into detail. When we were on the Wish, I didn't get the experience of being announced because I happened to be the last person to board the ship. So I hadn't really anticipated kind of as we walked in and then they announce our name and everybody's clapping. And so that was really kind of fun. And it's hard to not smile through something like that. So it was just kind of like, wow, just taking it all in. And so we boarded kind of early afternoon, I think. I think we were at our room by a little after 2 p.m. from what I recall.
Christy, Dave, any thoughts on boarding the Dream again?
It's always fun. It's always nice. As Dan said, you walk in and they ask, we always say we're the Blake's family, or we say we're Blake's family. It always ends up being announced as the Blake's family, but it's fun just having that announcement and the clapping, and then you just kind of welcomed on, and then you're in the atrium, which is gorgeous. Yeah, and then we got some deck food, which was still pretty early-ish for all the people that were waiting to get on the ship still, but it was primo because then we were able to get in there and get our chicken tenders, and Blake got a burger and then switched to pizza, and so we were able to get some good food, and then he never ended with the pizza, so that was a fun experience on the ship. But yeah, it was great.
And those burgers, those deck food burgers, Christy, they were so good.
They were so good. Like the best deck food burger. I had that burger like 3 more times on that cruise, at least, because it was just, and the bun they're using right now, and the burger was like, they were perfect.
Yeah, it looked like they were actually melting the cheese really well, which they sometimes have trouble with. But for you, every time I looked at it, it was like a really nicely melted cheeseburger. So it looked really good.
You guys had a burger too. One of you had a burger, right?
I had a regular burger, non-gluten free version, and then Roger had the plant burger actually, and we really liked it a lot. So.
Yeah, so they were a hit.
Nothing hits better than deck food after any sort of long excursion day or embarkation. It's just primo.
No, it is.
Well,
and it was empty up there. And like the wind was blowing. And so the airflow was really nice. Like it was lovely up there. It didn't get crowded until we were basically wrapping up. And we had to go and sort out the dining room situation and put our Palo reservations together. And we ended up going to Remy with a whole bunch of the adults that were in the group, all but Dave. And then the other 2 were in late dining, but also ended up wanting to switch. So we went and did all of that on deck 2 before the dining time ended. And that worked out really well.
Well, we are going to step away from moving through embarkation day because we have a lot to get through on this sailing. Let's go ahead and jump into staterooms real quick. Dan, Roger, what stateroom did you book and what did you think of the staterooms on the Dream?
We were on Christy actually booked for us, a veranda stateroom, family veranda stateroom, or just a veranda stateroom. And it was actually quite lovely. It was just as lovely as the one we had in the Wish, very similar. But I think the only difference was actually the bathrooms were updated on the Wish, but it was the regular bathrooms on the Dream. And other than that, just as lovely and just as fabulous. So.
But more storage on the Dream.
Yes.
That's true. There's one extra cabinet. Yeah. So that was really nice and handy. It came in quite handy.
It's great.
Christy, Dave, what stateroom did you book?
Dave, do you know?
We had the deluxe family veranda.
Yeah, so we went with the family veranda because I figured for a longer cruise, we should have a little extra space. And that worked out really well for us. We were all on deck 8. Our other friends were as well. They were just on the other side of the forward elevators. We were near the midship elevators. The location worked out really well for all of us because we could like meet in an elevator bank and walk down to each other's hallways if needed. So location was great. Rooms were great.
And our room stewards were all fabulous.
Oh my gosh. Like, so good. Ours needed extra hazard pay, which we gave him some of. One of it wasn't our fault. Like, Blake took a bath, as he does still, and he loves himself a little bath and drained the water. And it was determined after the fact that you can't just drain the water normally because it comes up the toilet sides floor. So our room guy had to clean that up, and then he was back later to help us after my ailments. So he was amazing.
Yeah.
But the cast members definitely make a difference between other cruise lines. You know, they're the ones who make it worthwhile to come back, and you want to come back. And so you do the booking for the reservation for the next cruise. So because of the cast members, so it was just really lovely.
They create the magic.
Ruth, we love a cast compliment here.
Yes.
Well, let's go ahead and turn to dining. Why don't we go ahead and just do some highlights of rotational dining? Dan, Roger, you will have some new restaurants to you, new menus. Was there anything about any of the 3 rotational restaurants that stuck out to you or any highlight dishes that you had?
Yeah. So I think based on the timing of when we did Paolo one night, Remy one night, and one night that I didn't get to go to dinner, we ended up with just Enchanted Garden and Animator's Palette for each of our dinners throughout the week. And I think we went through 2 or 3 different menu swaps with those. Really great. Roger and I always love getting seafood. We're from New England, from the Boston area specifically. So we were trying all the different seafoods we could. I am a big fan of scallops, so they were on lots of different menus, and I was able to try them in different ways. Roger tried a whole fish at one point in one of our meals, so some pretty exceptional seafood. Desserts were also great.
I think it was really neat also that we had only been on a short cruise before. We had not experienced the menu changes every few days. So that was really nice because, when you go back to either for us, it was Animator's Palette or Enchanted Garden, or even, was it Royal Palette? I'm sorry. Yeah. Having a different menu when you return actually kind of refreshed the experience and gave us new options, so that was really nice. And all in all, they were always very, very concerned and careful with, Christy being gluten-free, and it was really lovely.
Yeah, and our serving team was amazing. And I think that we actually got, because typically, especially with the allergy, we tend to be always the ones closing out the place and so on. There were a few nights where they got us out pretty quick. They were on the ball. They took really good care of us, got everything coming quickly. So our serving team was definitely amazing.
Yeah, Susila and Song were both fantastic.
Christy, anything else to add to rotational dining?
So we got to experience some new menus. We had then the full week long menus for those ships and then an extra set. And they were some great options. And so I was pretty pleased with like the newer set of menus that came out for the back end of our cruise. So there was one night where our server was so cute, but because I ordered so much food because the things were so exciting looking, and he just brought a whole bunch. Like there was one or two things they couldn't make for me, but there was so much on this menu that I went to town. The new like second half menus are really, really, really good. And there were just so many great, like the appetizers, just so many, and then really good dessert. I felt like the buffet food this time too, during the day, was really good. Like some really interesting options. I wasn't able to eat it, but one day they even had stuffed cabbage, but there was something in the way it was cooked, so I didn't get to have that. But there was like these different lamb stews and beef stews and just a bunch we ate buffet food quite a bit actually this trip for lunch, which typically we would stick more to deck food or even maybe a sit down dining on occasion. But it was really good.
Yeah, they had on the carving station one day, they had this flank steak that was really, really amazing. I think it ended up on your salad the next night or that night for dinner, but it was really amazing. And I'll agree because, the buffet food sometimes can be hit or miss. I feel like it was pretty hit the entire trip.
And just one kind of unrelated food point to our servers. What I loved is the fact that they would, start off and say, "Okay, family, what are we going to have tonight?" And they didn't realize until the last morning, Roger and I had breakfast before we disembarked. They were asking us kind of the relationship of everybody. And I was telling them because they thought Christy and I were specifically related. And I'm like, no, we're not related. And, we met on this other cruise. And then Christine and John, who were with us, during the week as well. And I said, we're just a group of friends. And, it was really a nice compliment that how well we kind of got along and meshed together. And we all don't know each other that well. And then, in particular, he was very complimentary about how much he enjoyed working with Christy because he said, sometimes it can be challenging with special menus. And he thought that you were just really respectful and really kind of help you find what you needed. So those are really nice kind of compliments that he gave us that last morning.
I love that.
Yeah. And you guys are the family we've gathered. So, it's this is how it works. So I will say one of the funny things, too, was because of different circumstantial things happening along with Paulo Remy, I think we made it 5 nights before he ended up having a full complement of our team at the actual table. It was like the first night there was one missing. Next night we had Paulo, so no one showed up. So it was very funny that we just kept joking. There was one more night where there wasn't the full complement.
Speaking of specialty dining, we know Paulo. We love Paulo. I really want to talk about Remy since we don't get to talk about it a whole lot. But to discuss Paulo, everyone gets one sentence. What's your sentence review of your Paulo experiences?
I think it was probably, if not the best, one of the best experiences that we've had at Paulo in our entirety of stay. And we've been to a lot of Paulos. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, the server was really great. His recommendations were amazing. He was funny. And the food was really good. And some of us like tried stuff from different people, and that was really fun too. Some people even ordered stuff gluten-free so I could try stuff off their plate because it didn't change their experience, right? And it was a special night. It was more than a sentence. Yeah. Take that, Lake.
Yes. Our server was Darko, and he was exceptional. I agree. We actually went up and thanked him on the last night. I think that was in my opinion, our best meal all week long. Every single part of the meal was exceptional, and the wine pairing was great. It was all really good.
And it was our first experience with Palo. So, I think Darko did a really great job balancing the frequent flyers as well as the newbies to Palo. And that was really, really special because he was just genuinely enthused and happy to serve all of us individually.
Yeah, and something to add to that, Roger and I both work in human resources. And so there were two people in particular, Darko and a tour guide we had later, who found a really great way of kind of listening and understanding all of our needs and incorporating that in everything he said and talked about. And it wasn't just like delivering on the service, which was great as well, but he found that way to kind of pull us all together and interact with us appropriately. So yeah, so him and both Stanley, who we'll talk about later, in Malta, they were both exceptional at that.
Love it. Well, let's move in to Remy, because we have not talked about Remy in quite a while here, or specifically had either one of us do Remy. I've never done it. So let's move into how that experience was.
I need to preface this conversation. First of all, it was lovely, but I need to preface it by saying I got terribly ill this night. And we are still not 100% certain if it was norovirus or food poisoning. And then I don't think it has to be unsaid, right? But Dan separately got sick the next day.
Yeah.
And so did we both? We don't know. So we just have to preface it by saying that dark cloud sat over the end of Remy. And let me also say that because I missed like some of my Remy meal, they wanted to re-give me Remy, like the parts, at least I really just wanted the dessert. And they were like, well, you should have the cheese plate, but really you gave away half of your beef and you didn't even eat it because you were starting to get sick. So you should have the beef course. So Remy tried to like give me a whole bunch of courses, but then they also served me gluten, which I placed in my mouth and started to eat. So my Remy experience was very, I would say, unconventional. But if we take out all of those things, the service was really good. The food flavors were really, 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 really good. And the friendship and experience that we had was really good as well.
Yeah, and I can talk through it because I was there the whole evening for dinner and Roger was as well. So what it started out with is Christy, myself, Roger, Christine, and John all there for dinner. And I thought what was really cool, I didn't realize that kind of when you got to that floor, you went kind of left to Paolo and right to Remy, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't realize it was kind of all connected. And so, we go into Remy, and then they kind of bring us right into kind of a sitting room with one big table that was kind of semi-blocked off from the rest of the room. So it was almost like a private experience that you'd get, if you were out with a big group in a restaurant. And, the menus, so they gave us options of two different menus from two different chefs. One was a French menu. The chef from the restaurant in...
Oh, Victoria and Albert?
Victoria and Albert.
Yes, exactly. And so I actually picked the French menu, as did Roger. I think Christine and Dave split with theirs so they could share quite a bit with each other. And then Christy, I think you had the French menu as well.
I had a hybrid though, because I also don't eat seafood and can't have gluten. And so I did have a lot of I had enough changes in my meal that I would have had a different experience than other people because of not eating seafood.
So they gave us a nice champagne. We all had champagne to start, which was really nice. And then they also had a champagne experience that went with each course, which Christy got. I got the wine experience that went with each course. And then Roger actually got the non-alcoholic experience, which is about half the price. And so there was a different drink for him for each course. Again, the food was exceptional, like lots of different things that some I haven't tried before. And so, yeah, so I thought that overall, and as you said, Christy, our server and the wine server as well were exceptional. And then, dinner, cheese, all of the different things. So it was great.
Double dessert.
Double dessert. That's right.
Yeah, I started to change apparently everybody could tell, including the server, because as soon as he was done describing the cheese, he was like, "Can I get you some ginger ale?" And I was like, "Man, I have ginger ale." And we were asking it at the same point because my face was losing its ability to hold color. We actually all thought it was motion sickness at first because the ship was very vibraty and moving. And that part of I think we were all the way aft, deck 12 aft, and we were very vibraty. So that is what we originally thought it was. Dave brought me some Dramamine at some point, but then I had to leave. Like it just wasn't gonna make it for the rest of the meal. But like even the explanation of the cheeses, he did such a good job because some people really liked soft cheese. Some people liked all cheese. Some people liked blue cheese. Some people didn't. And they were able to differentiate and make a plate for everybody based upon what people liked and didn't like. I think couples shared, right? Like you guys shared.
Well, definitely a little bit of a different experience at Remy, but I'm glad some of you still had a very lovely time and some of you had parts of a lovely time.
That's right.
But let's go ahead and wrap up the ship with just some highlights of activities, experience, or shows that you all got to see. What were a couple standouts for you before we head into these ports?
Did any of us see one show the whole cruise? I don't think so.
Roger went to Devil Wears Prada too, but that
With me.
With you. That's right.
That was a lot of fun. But we also, because it was our first time on the Dream, we did the tour.
The Art of the Theme Show.
Yes, Art of the Theme Show. And George from Wales was a cast member who led that. And it was absolutely fascinating to learn some of the kind of the secrets and the fun history of the Dream, where it fell in its making, in the whole lineup of all of the ships and everything, and the specifics of why they did what they did on this specific ship. So that was really neat.
What was your favorite thing you learned?
Yes, the color of the ship.
Yes.
So if I remember the story correctly, when Disney was first incorporating the ships and getting approval, they wanted to paint the bottom part of the ship black, and it's not allowed in maritime. Is that right? Saying that right? And the lore goes that there was somebody in the office who came into the meeting. Her name, I believe, was Monica, and she was wearing a dark, we both already know this, she was wearing a dark, very, very dark navy blue dress, and they said, that's the color we're going to go with, and that's what they got approved. But apparently it was still quite a battle.
And the lifeboats, too, because they wanted to match Mickey's shoes. So rather than doing the traditional orange, they did Mickey shoe yellow orange. So that was really cool, and that was really neat.
Yeah, and with the lifeboats, that's where they had to prove that the yellow was as visible as the orange out at sea. Christy, Dave, any highlights of things you did around the ship?
We did most of someone from the archives had come on, and she did a multi-part series talking about the history of just Disney in general, about, the founding of Disneyland, about Disney World. The ones that we only saw half of was about the at sea, the thematic at sea stuff. So, and it was more than just the cruise line. It was actually talking about Mickey's and team's relationship with the sea, all these different cartoons that were themed around the ocean and seafaring. So it was very cool. It was the archive woman who just brought pictures and trinkets and stories. The one story that they told, which was amazing, was in the original Mary Poppins, there's the snow globe that has the house that, when she tells a story and she shakes it, it goes in and so on. Well, just like every other movie set, a lot of times when a movie wraps up, they'll just get rid of the props. And so there was an archivist that they had hired to basically create the archive department. And he was talking to the janitor because he found the janitor would know where all the things are buried. He's got access to everywhere. And he's like, hey, have you seen anything? And he was talking with the janitor and he noticed this snow globe sitting on top of the locker behind the janitor. He said, what's that? Where'd you find that? And he said, oh, I don't know. I picked it out of the trash one day. And it was the snow globe from the original Mary Poppins. And so it was just happenstance thing where he was able to salvage it and keep it. And they were able to use it to replicate in the remake that happened recently and so on. But it's just this great stories like that, where it's like all the things that they were able to collect and all the historic materials that Disney's collected over the years that they, share and want everyone to know about. So it was very interesting.
That was a highlight for sure, that series. And that's a nice thing that they do on longer cruises where they have stuff like that. I think part of the reason we missed, I would have gone to see Disney Believe. Oh, because Dave and I went to, with Christine and John also, for cruises 8 nights or longer, they have the Castaway Club event now for gold and above. And part of that was they were going to try to show us some backstage stuff, or it's not backstage, but
behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes for the stage show. And it was the Disney Believe, and the Disney Believe was going to be that night. Well, we ended up, I think, at Palo for longer than the Disney Believe was playing. So we didn't get to go. And we ate so much. I think we all had to go for a walk after. But the behind the scenes thing was super cool because they were starting to show us what it's like to bring in the different characters and entertainers, rather, the performers.
The cast.
Yeah, the cast. And just they had us listening to the stage director about bring in this person, drop these lights, put this one, and it was so cool. But then something snapped. I think the line that was supposed to carry somebody who was flying through the stage or whatever actually snapped. And they needed it for the performance that night, so they had to cancel. They had to end that early.
And it was funny because the way that they ended it, it's because, of course, he's going on about you're hearing things you don't normally hear of the stage direction and so on. So they come on and they do this whole thing, and he comes out. He says, so normally when something fails, they'll have the announcement you just heard. Something actually did fail. So, we have to end it. And what's funny was nobody seemed to know that was actually real, because even the entertainment director who was doing the presentation with him came out and said, yeah, I wasn't sure that was real. I thought that it was just part of the show he was giving you guys. So, yeah, it was kind of a funny moment of reality of being at sea.
Yeah, it was nice that we also had a group of us because like Dave, like you said, you guys only got to see the first part or the second half of that first presentation about the ship. I got to see the whole thing, but then I missed part of the second one, and you guys saw the whole second one. So we could all, when we met up afterwards at dinner or whenever, go to debrief with each other and talk about it, and it really made for a really great cruise experience for all of us.
I think as with many group cruises or group of people cruising together cruises, we spent a lot of time drinking coffee and eating and hanging out and talking. And really, we spent a lot of time at meals or sitting and having coffee and just sitting and hanging out. And so that really was how we spent a large part of the day. But we also, some of us went on walks some days. It was just, good walking track. It was just really nice.
It's funny that you mentioned that because my last ship question was going to be, with a group, you always end up with a spot or a meetup location. And it's just always the spot, either pre or post dinner, that everyone knows they're meeting at. Where was that spot?
I don't know if we had coffee in the beginning, and so we would meet at the coffee shop a lot. But then other than that, it was just, I think, meeting at those meals. And then everybody...
A few times with at least Roger and I and the three of you. And I think Christine and John often were up on the deck, so they were getting deck food, kind of sitting out in the sun, reading and so forth. So we didn't, but it was probably the restaurants where we met up the most. And then we typically were there early dinner seating at 6, and we were often the last people to leave as they were cleaning up for the next seating. So we definitely got our money's worth out of those meals for sure.
Christy, did Blake utilize the kids club at all?
Almost none. Like the least amount of kids club going, and this was after we've spent 15 days together. We were really hoping that he was going to take advantage of that a little bit. The first day, everybody was just tired, and he had gotten some Legos that we brought on the trip for his birthday because he turned 13 on this trip, and he did Legos in the cabin. So he did do that the one day. And I know Dave and the Goodfellows did, the Fine Fellows. He did call them the Fine Fellows. I always call you the Goodfellows, but Blake did originally call you the Fine Fellows, didn't he? Dan and Dave and Blake did Midship Detective Agency. They did the
Muppets Midship Detective.
Yeah, the best one.
And then Dave and Blake did the other two. But sadly, he did not go.
I think he got overloaded on the first part of our trip, just being go, 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 super hot. I think he just really reveled in the downtime, and he was sort of done with people at that point. So even though it would be people he likes to engage with, like kids his age, I just think he was over it.
Unfortunately. And then our port days were kind of involved also. There was a lot, and we'll get into that, I think, next. Yeah. But there was long movement port days. So then people he would have wanted some downtime.
I think it is about time that we move away from the dream and jump into these amazing ports. You've got 5 port stops: Hania, Mykonos, Dubrovnik, Corfu, and Malta. Hania would be your first stop.
Yeah, so in Hania, we just decided to go so DCL will take you on a bus that takes you in closer to the port. And so DCL takes you on a bus to the harbor, which is the area you want to be in versus where the ship docks in a shipyard. And it's maybe a 10-minute walk from where DCL drops you off to where the harbor is. We actually walked around there and had a really delightful meal at a restaurant called Lithos, which had wonderful gluten-free options. And the highlight the server was really exceptional, but they also were so understanding of our need to have ice water. They actually brought us, I'm just telling everybody to go to Lithos because they were so wonderful. The food was so good. Oh my God. Dan and I shared this Greek salad, everything. We ordered a ton of food and everything was so good. But Dan and I shared a Greek salad, and man, that was the best ever. But they brought us buckets so we could ask for tap water. So that's something for Europe as a tip is not every restaurant will offer you tap water, but if you ask for tap water and they offer it, they will bring it instead of charging you $1 million for the fancier bottles of water. And then ice. We all got ice water till our little hearts were content, and they didn't make us feel bad about it. And ice is impossible to come by in Europe. And man, that was a delight. So Lithos had amazing food, great service. I ate very safely gluten-free there. And I think, Dan, didn't we have pasta too?
We did. I was looking at the pictures. Yeah, we had a penne pasta with a sauce and ricotta, which was fantastic. It was one of the dishes they could do specifically with gluten-free pasta. And I think that's where Roger had the whole fish, which he devoured. So it was fantastic. And then you also introduced me to the Hugo Spritz, which I then had several other times on the trip, which was fantastic.
They were delicious. So that was a really good restaurant. And then afterward, Dave and Blake went back to the ship, and Roger and Dan and I walked around, and we went to this store that we bought linen from. And this lady was just so wonderful who worked there and helped us find things that fit us and was just so lovely. And we walked around a little bit more. And then I think I got an ice cream bar, and it was just great. And then we walked back.
Yeah. That clothing store, just to point that out, which was right next to Lithos, the linen clothes, which I was dying to get. But when I went in, I said, look, I'm looking for something a little bit bigger because I'm a bit bigger. And she got a kick out of that, and then proceeded to find me, great items that fit. So it was really great.
And I will point out that the linen shirts at the store next to Lithos were cheaper for basically the same shirts than Mykonos. So buy your linen at Hania/Crete instead of Mykonos. So
speaking of Mykonos, this is going to be your next port day. What did you get up to here?
So Christy and I and Blake just got off the ship, and we had a tender in, but we were actually in a fortunate spot because most of the other ships, there's a lot of, I think, like, what, 5 cruise ships, I think, in port that day. Most of them were off like a good mile down the harbor, whereas we were directly across from where the tender was taking people. So we were right in the thick of things. We walked along the shoreline. We went to they have these windmills up on this hill. So we walked up to there and saw that. And then we went to a place called Pepper's for lunch, where I'm a very particular eater. Some would say picky. I like the word particular. And one of the things I typically don't like is feta cheese. It's okay. I can have it every now and then, but it's just Christy ordered this dish, which was this baked or fried feta. And it came with like tomato and basil and all this stuff. It was like a feta pizza on these gluten-free pita bread things that were amazing. I could not get enough of it. It was so amazing. And Christy was like, "You're eating feta. He doesn't eat feta. He's eating feta." So it was really a great place to go. Very, very delicious food. And we got these souvlaki, chicken, pork. Get the pork. I got the chicken. Christy got the pork. And they were all like, "You should get the pork." I'm like, "I want to try the chicken." I tried both. You want the pork. The chicken was very good, but the pork was amazing. So definitely go with the pork souvlaki.
And the Goodfellows. Did you do an actual excursion here?
We did. Actually, the night before, we were looking at we were all talking at dinner at what we were going to do the next day. And I said to Roger, did you book a 7.5-hour tour for tomorrow? Which I was like, are you sure? And so it was called the Delos Island and Mykonos Town Highlight. And so everybody had to tender into the harbor, where we then got on a small sized ferry.
This was a Disney cruise line excursion. So that's why we met in one of the dining locations, and then we tendered out off the boat.
Yeah, actually, and I think that was the early morning. Yeah, that was the 6:45. Yeah, we got off the boat at 6:45 and then tendered into the harbor and then took the other ferry out to Delos Island. It was amazing. It's kind of an island of ruins. We had a tour guide, Philippa, and she was a graduate student who was also an archaeologist, right, as well, and was so excited to be there and give us a tour. There were a lot of groups, and every group was about 35 people. So they were big groups of people.
Didn't you say there was like 500 people on this tour?
Yeah.
Multiple hundreds anyway.
Yeah. Definitely, there were at least 500 people, yes, in lots of different groups, yes. And so out to the island, it was amazing, the history, the ruins. She, had all of the information. It was about 3 hours, and you're kind of out in the open sun. So it was, really needed to dress appropriately for it, have, proper hat and everything. And so it was hot. You got back on the ferry, went back to the harbor, and then walked around kind of that same area that Christy and Dave were at, and kind of down all these little streets, kind of showing us kind of different highlights of the town. It was super crowded that day. A lot of the restaurants were showing kind of World Cup matches. And so there were a lot of people kind of sitting outside, and it was kind of hard navigating. My reflection of the day, overall, I thought it was fantastic. It felt like it should be two different excursions. I think kind of one long day was a bit too much. We ended kind of the tour at a restaurant, which had kind of one big room, kind of function room with really long tables, and you kind of sat next to, whoever was there with you and your grouping. We actually ended up sitting next to this lovely family who we had seen the day before at Lithos, and they also had a child who was eating gluten-free as well, I believe, right, Christy? And Christy had made friends with them, as she does so well. And so then we saw them on our tour and ended up sitting next to us. So it was really nice to get to know them as well. The meal was kind of a complement of all the things some of which Dave just referred to, but we had kebabs, we had French fries, which seemed to be a highlight of a lot of meals. There was pork, there was sausage, trying to think what else. So it was, and the Greek salad, of course. And so, it was really good. We were pretty tired after that. A lot of people were going back into the town to do some shopping, and I think we were ready to go back to the ship. So we went back to the ship after that. And I think that was the afternoon before Remy. So we wanted to kind of get back and get ready for that.
I did stay longer than Dave did in Mykonos to do some shopping of my own. I was hoping that Dan and Roger were going to be done with their tour to meet me. It didn't work out, but I found a shop and just bought a bunch of awesome like linen and other items that it was just like a really nice shopping experience. The store was just really lovely. Like I literally got stuck in one shirt and she had to help me get out of the shirt. And, I think I probably bought more because she had helped me get out of the shirt. But it was very safe. I felt very comfortable walking around by myself and going back to the ship by myself. So it is an easy port. But when they're talking about these narrow streets, like at one point, I have very short arms. I could touch both walls in a walkway with my arms and still have arm left. They were so narrow, some of these walkways. And some of that was a little bit stressful. So if you are a person who's afraid of crowds, I would keep that in mind if there's a lot of ships in port, but still a lovely port, very walkable. So I would like to return there for sure.
And the famous windmills are right near where you're dropped off from the tender. So, it's a quick, if you can get off the ship early, go visit some of the big sites that you really want to see, then hop back on the ship. If you're you're not comfortable with groups, big crowds, then I think that's probably the way to go. But other than that, it was kind of interesting to be in Mykonos. We've heard so much about, and it was our first time. So
I really appreciated too that my family ate in restaurants at these first 2 port days. People would make fun of me because I will spend all this money on a trip, but then I'm very frugal and I'm like, there's all this money or there's all the food on the cruise ship and we've paid for the food on the cruise ship. We could go to the cruise ship and eat the paid for food. But I am really, really happy that we ate in these ports because those meals were memorable and delicious. And I would do that again in a heartbeat.
Well, yeah, and it's not like when you're in the Caribbean where you go to port and you maybe get different variations of jerk chicken or something like that. It's, so there's nothing really fancy about it. This is, how often are you in Greece and can get feta and Greek salad and souvlaki and all this stuff in Mykonos, so agreed. I'm very happy that we did those meals off the ship for sure.
Well, we're going to jump into your next day here. This is Dubrovnik. What did you get up to this day?
So the plan was Christy had booked a private boat tour that was going to take us on the gems of Dubrovnik. It was going to take us around and see some different sites. Unfortunately, as we already talked about, there was a bit of an illness wave that came through and knocked off 2 of the people. So Dan and Christy did not feel up to getting off the ship and doing a boat excursion. So Roger, Blake, and I did. Christy was able to get off to at least walk us into the area where we were supposed to meet the person. There was some interesting adjusting we had to do to find this person. There was confusion about where we were supposed to meet and all that. But we figured it out. We got it figured out in the end. Go ahead,
and
Christy.
I will say this was my fault. And just for people who are booking something privately on your own, the website of the place I booked through said to me basically right at the port, outside the port. And we contacted but the receipt, the ticket like that you would think would have the information basically said it wasn't clear about the meeting. So I wrote to the company to say, where are we meeting? And then their response was confusing. And if I had just looked at the original website for where we were supposed to meet, it would have been a better answer. So I would say, look at your original booking site if you're taking a private excursion to see where the meeting location is supposed to be.
Yeah, and I also think we also had downloaded WhatsApp, which seemed to work pretty well on the ship, especially because, as many of you might know, if you're on ship internet or Wi-Fi even without internet, if you have an iPhone, iMessage tends to work across those things, and so you can still communicate. But if you have people in your party who don't have iPhones, you can't talk to them because it doesn't work. WhatsApp allows you all to communicate and work. Yes, Roger, we're looking at you with your non-iPhone and Lake. But WhatsApp is also beneficial because a lot of people in Europe will use it. So when we were trying to find our driver, we were using WhatsApp. Now, another interesting tidbit, which I'll share this because this happened multiple times, they seem to think that it's a thing where these drivers will send a picture of where they are and say, well, here's where I am. Can you find it? Now, that's well and good, but if your first time being in Dubrovnik, I have no idea where that is. So I would send him pictures. He said, well, okay. The other issue was we thought we were looking for a car, but we were looking for a boat. So it all worked out. We thought, because he's like, I'm right here. I said, well, I don't see anybody right here. And then Blake's like, well, there's a guy in a boat who's waving his hand down there. That was him. So the guy we had was great. I think there were still some issues in that, and this might be again that private tour type thing. Sometimes I wonder if the company you book through is these big companies that subcontract to the locals to actually do the thing, and they don't always tell them what it is that it was sold. So we got on the boat and the guy said, well, what would you like to see? And we're like, I mean, this package that we bought. So he was great though. He was like, I will take you anywhere. And he had water and drinks on board. He had life jackets. He had towels, and he was young and he wanted to really make sure we had a great time. And so we went to these caves where Blake and I got in the water. We swam into the cave and out these blue caves. It was really amazing. Blake actually said was one of the better experiences that he had on the trip was doing that swim. We then went to a beach where we went to a little harbor area. He kind of took us to some private areas, like this is where the locals go. So that was really cool to see these small towns. Roger, Blake, and I got off, used the restroom, walked around. We also went to a beach that he would have let us go to, but it was sort of weird because we were down 2 people and it was just Roger, Blake, and I, and we kind of were like, no, yeah, I think we're good. So we minimized a little bit what the experience could have been, but it was still a very fun time. I don't know, Roger, what you thought of it.
Yeah, I thought our particular tour guy, he was fabulous. But I would agree with the independent tour. There was a little bit of a disconnect between the tour vendor versus the tour guide themselves. But otherwise, yeah, it was amazing. He gave us so many insights personally of the things that we saw, the places he took us to. These are all great tips for us to know where to go back to when we do a visit. So if we go back to Dubrovnik, these are the things that we want to see and where we want to go and perhaps how we can do it, and so that was really helpful. I think overall on this cruise, it was this amazing smorgasbord of a taste of everything, at least for Dan and I, because it was the first time we had been to any of these locations. And it was all exciting. Everything was shiny. And we were going, oh my goodness, this is all lovely. But there was definitely not quite enough time at each port, I think, to really dig in. But all in all, this tour guide he was amazing and enthusiastic and really quite personable. So we had a great time.
And that's truly the essence of cruising, right? You get these little tastes of all these amazing places with the comfort of this hotel that moves around and brings you there. But then you generate so many, oh, I would love to come back here. Maybe I got enough of that place. Or no, we need to come back and spend more time here. That is just the glory of why we do this.
Just to add one more thought on for me. So as Christy mentioned, she and I both were not feeling well. The day before was a sea day, and I had actually gone to health services and then was self-isolating for 24 hours in my room. And my sleeping was off a bit. So I happened to be awake when we came into port at Dubrovnik, which was about 6 a.m. And I went out on the deck, and we happened to be on the side where we were coming up against the dock, up against the port. And I was looking down at the workers that were kind of readying to grab the lines as the ship came up against the dock. And they were like so excited. They were clapping, they were jumping up and down, and at like smiles on their faces. And I thought, well, this is really cool. And the other really neat thing was because all the houses are on the side of the hill just across from the dock, and many of them have lots of large windows, there was this reflection of the ship. I could see the whole ship through the reflection across people's windows of their houses. And it was just such a cool kind of quiet moment coming into port that even though I didn't get off the ship at all that day, that kind of really stays with me.
Yeah.
Love
and
it.
I do know we weren't on it, but Christine and John went on a wall walk on the old town. And they said it was really fun. It was hot, but they did say they did have spots along the way for refreshments and to
Yes.
rest. So they were able to make it through the whole thing. But it was, yeah, they said it was really fun.
Love it. Well, let's move into your next day, Corfu. What did you get up to here?
So Corfu was interesting. Christy had an idea that which thought was a good one. Is even if you don't have an excursion, let's just get off at every port. Just to, even if we walk around the market port area, let's just do that. So we got up and we had full intentions to do that, and then we started to hear word that Corfu was out of water, that their water was not working at all on the island. Apparently, they're doing updates to the infrastructure, and this happens every now and then. So Christine and John had gotten off, and they reported back, hey, there's no water. So we decided to wait a little bit to see if the water came back on, what have you. I ended up cutting off the ship and running along the port. I just you know what? It's been a hot minute since I've done a workout. We did all that walking, but now I've done nothing on the cruise ship. So Christy took a picture of me from Cabanas of running up and down the pier. Just did, a few laps to get to 2 miles, and it was fun. So that was good. But yeah, so we then, when we did finally decide we wanted to go, we got off. We went to where you exit the port, and we saw the lines for security, which were miles long, and realized we would have time to get out. As Blake joked, we would get out, look around, and have to get in line to get back on the ship because it was how long the lines were. So we said, you know what? I think we're good. And we got back on the ship. But I know Dan and Roger, you guys did do an excursion through Disney on the island.
Yeah, we did a port adventure, the Flavors and Heritage Corfu Food and History Tour. And through our group chat that morning, we were a little worried because we had seen, I think it was Christine and John that had got off first and had already been in town and heard about this kind of water shortage. And so there really wasn't any kind of notice to us prior. We went into town, we met up with our tour guide. It was really great. We only had 12 of us in this tour? So it was a small tour. Our tour guide was fantastic. She was so much fun. And it was all about eating, which was really great. And so we had been walking around for a little bit, and she was kind of describing different buildings and the history of Corfu and the importance of Corfu kind of in world history, which sadly I didn't know. And I was really glad that she shared that with us. And as we were going, people started asking, hey, is there a spot where we can use the restroom? And then it became clear that restrooms were not available to us for a while. So that did get resolved just as we were having lunch a little while later. But on that specific tour, we started out at a restaurant, small little restaurant on one of the side streets, and had both spanakopita, or spinach pies, and Roger, we had, what was it, Bugatsa. And so that was really great, really fresh, cool foods. They talked about the history of that. And we,
like a custard pastry. It was so lovely and perfect to start the day.
And then, we'd walk a ways, we'd learn more about the buildings and the history. And then we had the next stop, which was to learn about the history of kumquats on the island and how they had been brought to the island and then become very much a local delicacy with everything. And so we went into one shop that made a liqueur out of them, along with ice cream and or gelato and lots of other things. And so that was really a lot of fun and very tasty. And then we had a very traditional Greek lunch with the whole tour team. And like I said, we had an opportunity to use the restrooms in that spot. So that resolved that. And then the last part of our tour, again, walking a bit more. And then we went to a gelato shop, which was one of the 100 top gelato shops in the world, according to some travel magazine. So that was really cool. And then we had to make sure we got back to the ship for the 4 p.m. departure. And the funny thing about that, we could see people running from the spot where you had to pick up the shuttle back to the ship. And then I saw in one of the Facebook group postings, somebody else who was on our same tour had posted from the other side of the ship where people were literally running to catch the ship at 4 p.m. So anyways, that was our day.
The thing with the security lines was that Corfu has everybody do security at the port for all the ships. And I think there were 3 ships in port, and all 3 ships were leaving around the same time. You go to your ship and you go put your stuff in the metal detector and right, all your stuff gets scanned. They had to do that for every single person at the whole port. And that is why we chose not to leave. My other issue with this day was that Disney has this app they force you to use, right? And nowhere did they tell you that there was no running water on Corfu. So even on the bus that they were taking the people from the ship to the, like, we can call it a harbor again, or the main city or whatever, right? They didn't tell anybody that there's no running water. But it was a bummer we didn't get to go and see it. We just walked the port because of the whole security line situation.
The other thing to point out, and this is something it may have happened in all of the ports in Greece, because what I found on the internet says in theory it should have, but we only noticed it in Corfu that because, of course, we weren't really off the ship, John and Christine had gotten back on the ship because they were tired of the no water. And so we met up with them at the adult area and they were like, oh, let's get a drink. And there was a sign there that said that because of local customs, what have you, no alcohol was going to be served while we were docked in port. It also included zero proof alcohol as well. So there literally was like, he's like, I can make you a virgin pina colada. And it was basically about all he could make at that point. So that's just something to note. And again, like I said, when I looked on the internet, in theory, it said all of Greece is like this. We didn't notice it in Mykonos or Hania, but we also weren't looking necessarily. So it's hard to say, but that was something to be aware of.
We've got one more port to discuss, and I think one that we're all very excited to hear about. Let's jump into Malta.
So Malta, I booked a private excursion. And what I did is there's a company I book private excursions with. People want to know, they can reach out to me and I'll give them the information. But this particular company did not have a one-day excursion in Malta. That was something that we wanted to do. So what I did was there was a tour company that offered like a multiple day excursion for Malta. That tour company was listed. So this is like the company I use as a broker, basically. It is not Viator, but it would be something like Viator. I reached out to that company and said, I would like to do a private excursion. There will be 8 of us because my friend Katie, who lives in Italy, was also flying in to join us for our excursion day. So we had the other couple and then all of us here on the podcast plus Blake. And she came up with a wonderful itinerary. So it included a little bit of a history and a discussion about Valletta, which is the downtown, the capital of Malta. It included a tour of the cathedral. There was a tour of a palace that we sort of ran out of time to be able to eat. It did include a snack of patsitsis for everybody. And then it included a tour of a private home.
It's like an old, I mean, I think it was like an old palace is what they described it as, but palace is a bit of a, it's like a, yeah, it's like a
house of a lord.
Casa Rocca Piccola.
And we can talk if we want more about each of these components, but then we went to a local or a Game of Thrones town, right? Isn't that like basically how he described it? But it was kind of cool to go through this like medieval town in Malta, like another walled city within their walled city, because it's all walled because of the wars and fighting and trying to protect this land. So everything is walled and could be closed up to keep the bad guys out. So we saw another medieval town, and that was popular for Game of Thrones, which maybe half the people in our group knew anything about that reference. And then we drove out to a farm and had a lovely dinner just with the sunset and copious amounts of wine and just like so many courses of food. It was the most perfect end of the cruise, really, that there could be. And it was Malta, so it was my people's place, which was really cute too.
Yeah, and it was a lovely family, the family farm. They were just, there was this older gentleman and his wife and their grandson, and they were welcoming and warm, and they wanted to make sure they made sure you were taken care of with your allergy. And they sat, like the old man sat with Blake and I, and he was in Blake and having discussions and made sure he loved Blake, made sure Blake got cucumbers and watermelon and all this stuff. And I think one of my favorites was when you mentioned that your family was from there. He said, where? And you said, well, the island of Gozo. He said, I was going to say that. It's exactly what it was in my head. And it was kind of neat that it was that recognition that, yes, you are one of these peoples. So it was an amazing experience.
They said my face looked Maltese. They gave us so much food. They had basically and it was all part of the tour, like brought in like a chef student. One of you guys talked to her, right? I believe at the end.
Yeah, we did talk to her. She came out a couple different times. She was exceptional in terms of just understanding what our needs were, and just the food was so delicious.
They made me gluten-free putstitsis.
Yes.
Like, which is a flaky pastry, basically, either stuffed with peas or stuffed with ricotta. And the fact that they figured out, and I bet she didn't have any lead time on that. I bet that she figured out how to make that between the time that I didn't get a gluten-free snack on our tour and when we got to that dinner.
Oh, and our tour guide was amazing.
Oh.
Stanley, he was a character, and he probably did make it happen. He probably let them know, hey, Christy hasn't been able to get any food. Could you really just make sure if you can to make it happen? So he was amazing.
And they had gluten-free crackers and gluten-free bread. And oh my God, that whole day, you know, like we've talked about this before, there's just different cruising events that just are good for the soul and are core memory moments. And that was a core memory day for me. And just everybody did so well together. And Katie, who came into the mix, she like would talk to each set of people too separately. And oh my God. And the tour guide too would talk to everybody. Like it was such a good day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I absolutely agree. That was such a fantastic ending to the whole cruise week. And Stanley, who was our tour guide, just as the day went on, he really picked up on cues from each of us and just incorporated so much into that. And he really was so engaging with Blake. I think that really helped Blake get through a very long day and probably really a different schedule for him. And the day even started later because we didn't get off the ship until 2 p.m. And then it was, going into the evening. And I don't think we got back to the port till like 10 or so, right? 10 or 10:30-ish. So it was an amazing day. Yes. Thank you, Christy, for booking that. It really,
thank you for doing it.
Really the only day that we were all off the ship together as a group.
How long was that excursion?
It was designed to be 7 hours long. It was designed to be from 2 to 9.
Yeah.
And I do think it went longer because we all were having such a good time at that restaurant, or at that farm rather, that we were there later than we were supposed to. And then Katie and I stayed for a drink on the Malta shore there. And it was so funny because we all had to, they had to as well, the rest of the group, but go back on a ship like a different way than we even left because it was so late at night. And it was just like at 11:30 when I was coming back onto the ship, because the ship was there until 2 a.m. Many of the crew were coming off. Like our head server was actually walking off with some of his friends to go out for a beer in town. And it was really fun to see the crew like getting their little night off time. Also, fun fact that the crew have to divide basically in half or something. And they each, however they determine it, for those overnight trips, at least half of the crew have to be on board. And so there is a limit for who can get off. This is our room steward was telling us, because if there's an emergency, they have to do lifeboats, or if they have to do whatever, they have to be able to have enough crew to run the emergency. And I'm like, I'm sorry for you, crew member, but that's an interesting fun fact for me to know. But that was just an interesting fact. And just like I said, seeing the people coming and going so late at night was really fun, because that doesn't happen on a Disney cruise.
I love it. What an interesting final day. Sadly, though, it is time to disembark the dream. How was your disembarkation, and what was everyone's process for getting back home?
So we started, first thing, Roger and I went and had breakfast. We wanted to see Susilla in song one more time, which was great, and had that chat that I mentioned earlier. We disembarked about 7:30. Christine and John were already on buses by that point. We got on our bus, very easy trip back to the airport. It was probably a good 50 minutes or so ride time. We did run into a little bit of a snag in the airport. So when we came into that airport, we realized there were kind of two different lines at immigration. There was the standard kind of person checking passports, and then there were the new kind of cameras where you could put your passport down, the camera sees you, and then let you through. What we noticed when we came in, when we arrived, that probably every fourth or fifth person didn't work, and then they got pulled out of line and presumably sent over to the manual check. And so we were fine when we arrived. When we were leaving that day, I went through the line and then Roger didn't. So he got pulled aside and I had no idea where he was for about an hour. And there were a lot of other people that were also waiting for their people to come through. And so subsequently I found out that Roger had kind of got pulled over to the end of the manual check line and kind of had to wait through that line, which I think he saw from a distance Christy, Blake, and Dave in that area. And then once we got through, we were certainly early enough, so we were fine. And then our flights, we flew connecting in London and then landed in Boston about 8 p.m.
And we got off the ship later, maybe at 8:30 or something. I was having a little bit of stomach issues. And then we had, I don't know what our transportation luck is, this really old bus. We walked by all these new young buses, like great. We had the oldest bus that air conditioning didn't work. But we were the last 3 people on it. And so the bus left pretty quickly. So that part was good. But this bus was sketch. And that driver also got honked at while we were driving down the highway. But we made it uneventfully enough to the port and everything was fine. We did our VAT money thing and that all worked out well. For people who are gluten-free, there is a gluten-free sandwich that is sold in bookstores or markets throughout Italy. And this particular sandwich was also at the airport. So I would recommend getting that if you were going to be gluten-free. It's just an easy lunch. And I bought it at the bookstore, basically upstairs when you're done with security. The other point I will point about security is I had issues with mine. Blake went right through, Dave went right through. But first, my passport, it wasn't reading. So the guy behind me was like, hold your hand down, directly on it tighter. So I did that and then it read it, but then it still wouldn't open the door. So then the guy behind me or a different person was like, oh, put your fingerprints on the pad. So once I put the fingerprints on the pad, it let me out. And I don't know. So listeners coming up through Rome for the rest of the time, thankfully, these people behind me were telling me what to do. So I wasn't with Roger in the 1 hour line after the fact being held hostage.
Yeah, not all of them worked that way. I literally I put my passport on. It just said, yep, you're good. And
same with Blake.
Did the same thing. So it wasn't everybody. It's just random. Yeah.
But try the fingers if yours doesn't work to see if putting your 3 fingers down is the key to opening up your door, because then that worked. But that's it.
Yeah. And then we got Blake and I got some pizza for the plane.
Well, what an amazing sailing. So many amazing ports and amazing adventures and memories that you all get to share with each other. Did you have any other notable cast interactions you didn't already highlight? I feel like you guys did a really good job of highlighting who you interacted with this.
I think Blake and I had an amazing Donald engagement. We went down, I saw Donald was having pictures, and so we went down there. And Blake was like, you're number one. And I don't know why Mickey's always the mascot. And he even pointed at the Admiral Donald statue and was like, yeah, I'm Donald. I'm number one. So the Donald experience, I think the character experiences in general were great, but that was a great one for Blake and I to do with Donald.
Yeah, and I think our stateroom steward was exceptional. We had a great person that we worked with on the Wish, or that was with us on the Wish, but from Indonesia was just kind of another level and really made it for us. So
love it. What was the port that maybe wasn't necessarily your favorite, but was the most surprising to you or had the most unexpected element?
For me, it was Mykonos. We didn't research at all. So I didn't really know what we were to expect in Mykonos. It was all white buildings, literally every building in Mykonos basically was white. And those little narrow passageways, it was unexpected.
Yeah. And the feta too that I enjoyed. That was very unexpected.
I really enjoyed Hania, Crete. That was a bit unexpected for me and for us, I think. Just that whole day was such a nice day. The food was so amazingly fresh. The people were so gracious. The harbor was beautiful. It didn't feel as busy as the other locations we were at, so it felt more manageable. And maybe that's why I liked it a little bit more.
I think it's bigger too, so it can eat the people so much better, right? And I don't know if there were as many cruise ships in port. There were a lot of cruise ships in Mykonos.
Yeah, I think Hania too is fun because it's like there's such a difference between where you get dropped off. You're kind of in this city area, and then you walk, just like Chrissy said, about 10 minutes into the harbor, and it's like a cute little like market pedestrian area and this harbor that's really beautiful, and it's very different from what you experience where they drop you off. So it's kind of a hidden gem.
Oh yeah, we bought medicine at a pharmacy Dan and I went to. And the like cute little owner man, first of all, we wanted like one more box of this medicine. And the lady like ran down to another pharmacy to get us a box. And the little owner man gave us each bottle of water. And it was just like cute little pharmacy, just like such good chat with the pharmacy lady. I love a good European pharmacy.
You do have a way of having people like really take care of you, which is really nice. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
You were taking care of Roger that day by getting him some medicine, which I'm very thankful for. So.
Love it. Well, Dan, Roger, what is next for the Goodfellows?
Oh, good question. So we did put the placeholder in, and we're starting to look at other options. Roger, what do you think?
Don't know yet.
Yeah, so many more cruises and so many more ships to try. So
the experiences I think you both had with the fjords, right? Did you?
Mm-hmm.
You had an unexpected lake, was it?
Yep.
Fjords, and then Chrissy, you had your dedicated trip. So that was something that was definitely piqued our interest. We have friends that have done the Alaska cruise. I absolutely would love to do that too.
Both such good cruises. There's some people doing the fjords next year, just saying. And hopefully Katie and I are going to be in that group as well. We're just not going to book it until the last minute. My
Both
friend Katie, not
amazing
your
options.
Katie, because your Katie's already booked at it.
Technically, we're not booked.
Oh, you're not? Oh, yeah. No one's booked, but people are going. Everybody has plans to go. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, and you know what's next for us? We have podcast cruise.
Well, we have a couple things between now and the podcast cruise.
I mean, our family doesn't like to sit still, apparently. I am taking Blake back to Europe in 5 days, and we are doing a river cruise with Tauk, and they have a children's program. We're going to try it out, and we're going to see what it's like.
And then we have
the podcast cruise.
The podcast cruise, yeah.
Which is in less than a month. That is insane.
So close. Well, Dan, Roger, thank you so much for joining this group to recap your amazing sailing.
thank you, Blake.
Thanks.
Thank you, Christy.
And Dave,
Thank you.
Chrissy, thank you for having us. It was great.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
It made the trip that much better. We have almost the two segments of Paris and Italy, and then our time with the fine fellows and our friends on the ship, and having you guys there made it that much better. It definitely elevated the experience to have you guys there. So we really appreciate it.
It's true.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Back at you, 100%.
And Dave, thank you for joining us for recapping your sailing as well.
Of course.
Christy, where can our listeners follow you?
You can find me all over the internet at Pack Your Pixie Dust. I have a new YouTube channel, so you can check that out. I even discussed in the latest episode how to pack for this epic trip and the strategies I used. And if you'd like to work with me to book a future vacation, you can find a link in the show notes that says Work with Christy. And I would love to talk to you to book you at no additional charge to you. Lake, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram and YouTube at MouseGen. Funny enough, speaking of the Norwegian Fjords cruise, I finally finished that video and put it up. So you can see all of the amazing sights and hikes that we did. So super excited for that. Please go check that out. And as always, you can follow the podcast at Instagram and Facebook at DCL Podcast, or find more information on our website. But that is going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The thing is it didn't feel like we were talking for 2 hours, and yet here we are.
Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Dave, Christy, and the Goodfellows for coming on and sharing their experiences sailing the Greek Isles. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.